Elena Roche's Classical Art Education Center is a Blue Ridge Academy's approved vendor. Before we dive into painting 2 and 3 object still lifes, we have to get this out of the way. The color of an object we see depends not only on the color of the illumination, but also on the strength of this illumination. When an object is illuminated by light of medium strength, the object's color is best revealed. Weak light, such as semi-darkness, weakens the intensity of the object's color, painting the object the color of the light air environment. Strong light significantly paints the illuminated surface of the object in its own color. The more intensely an area of the object's surface is illuminated, the more it is painted the color of the illumination. This is especially noticeable on glossy surfaces, where glare-filled areas of the surface almost completely lose their object's color, displaced by the color of the source. When depicting objects in a sketch, we must convey the general color of the lighting of their surfaces. This is the first part of the lesson where we take this theory and put it into practice. Because this is for beginners, I am also going to go into a bit more detail on how to draw the cloth convincingly before we paint it. Before we start, let's take a look at this cloth, right? So we can paint it 4 different ways. I don't want to take too much time on this because we'll be practicing a lot of other still life with cloth, but let's do it 2 ways because it's very easy for us to do it right in class here, right? So I will first leave it the way it is, kind of reflected light diffused from the windows, so it's not direct light, and you need to spot the difference and paint it just in such a way that shows that there is definitely a difference in how this looks, right? So let's take a look. You just stay there and I will turn on the light and you can see the difference. And then just what is the difference we're looking for? We're looking for change in colors, right? The values also change because this is a much stronger light, so the light becomes lighter. The darks might become darker, right? Because of that contrast. But also the color changes. So let me turn it off again. Yeah. And you kind of need to let your eyes get used to a darker environment. And after a while, you start seeing more details, right? But which one, how would you describe basically which one is warmer, which one is colder?
Well, this one's warmer because it looks more purplish.
In the light, yeah. Right? In the light looks more purpley. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, in the dark it looks more like a royal blue.
Okay. And when I turn off the light?
Yeah, it looks more royal blue. Like
just lighter and darker, right?
Yeah.
If you were to have those 2 side by side, how would you describe the color of the darkest parts of the shadow compared to each other? So like look at it right now and look at it now.
Well, of course they look a lot more prominent.
Mm-hmm. Darker, right?
Yeah.
So here the difference between light and shadow is less.
Yeah. And there's less shadows in general. Because on this one, it's only red at the creases where you kind of see the shadow.
Yeah.
When you turn on the light, it's like the whole thing that
right.
dips in the
right.
shadow.
And therefore, what we are practicing is to see that difference and practicing to capture those differences in color, right?
Yeah.
So we'll start with that because while we still have daylight, we have a nice reflected light from the windows. So we can do that. And then as the sun goes down, we'll turn on the light and then it will be perfect for that. All right, so now we're going to be looking at our dark blue cloth in the strong light. It is not as strong as it can be, right? What the strongest? If we took it outside, middle of the day, bright sun, then the colors will start to get really washed out, and the light will be lighter, shadows will be darker. This is still pretty strong, but not where it's washing out colors. By the way, it's interesting that I'm looking at what I see in the screen and what I see in reality, and the color is different. In reality, it looks more purpley, more like ultramarine blue. Here it looks more like sort of cyan, I guess. Don't trust the camera to tell you what is the right color or shape, or any of that. Okay, this is better. Okay. All right, so one of the things you need to remember is that when you're working with strong colors, and this blue is pretty strong, it is good for you to have some of the fresh paint. I'm not doing fresh on any of the yellows. I'm just refreshing them with my water. But I have a new permanent rose, Indian red, and Windsor blue. I'm only adding a little bit of water to them because I want them to be nice and concentrated. If they're nice and concentrated, then you can get a very dark value pretty quickly, right? So, all right. So, as we said, it looks kind of purpley. The hue is purpley. So I'm going to grab like a lot of my fresh pigment, and I'm going to stake out where are all my shadows, right? So Windsor by itself looks more similar to what we see through the camera, right? But we are looking at the actual cloth, and we need to make it more ultramarine blue-like, which means the blue that leans more toward the red, has more red in it. And I have to grab a bunch of rose to change this hue. And my rose is fresh too, so. At this point, I don't care if my rose gets a little messy with the blue, because I'm only painting this. All right, how is that? Yeah, pretty strong. Okay, so now that we hit on the overall hue, right? We now are looking at the fabric, and we're going like by itself, it will work maybe in the shadows. But what about the color? Will the color work in the shadows? Right? Because the everything in the light looks a little more like lighter purpley, but in the shadows, does it look quite so purpley? Maybe not, right? And we need to have not just the value separation, not just light and dark value, but also a little color change, right? Because it is all affected. So let's do this. So I'll just add a little water. How's that? If I go with this, like for example, all over the place, would that work?
It's still a bit dark, but maybe if it dries.
Right, or if I add more water.
Yeah.
Right? All right, so this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to add more water and use the same color. There we go, we can start with that. All right, so everything gets this hue now. I like how I pretty much got everything covered and it blended, all nice and red. Come on. And before it dries too far, I will pick up my main areas just a little, right? The light. I'm not like totally erasing it, I'm just letting a little water into it. Remember how you get a little water into your color, right? And it lightens it up. It just pushes the paint apart just enough. And I don't need it everywhere. I need it only in my main light. I'm going to leave this the way it is. I'm not going to separate this because I want more contrast on this fold here. This fold here, some of it is already kind of light. It's probably drying up. Right here, somewhere in here, it switches to where it goes into the shadow, and so even though the fold continues, it disappears into that shadow. Right here, this one, also the paint is drying up, so it's already starting to look lighter. And right here, the paint didn't dry very evenly, so I'll just spread it. Figure out what to do with it later, like with those lights and darks. Okay, so it may look a bit sketchy, but now that I'm seeing how it's drying up, it's looking good. So far, so good. So now I will take my smaller brush, and as it's drying up, I'm going to grab my darker, thicker, more pigment mix, and I'm going to change the hue once again, right? So I have a lot of it, and I am going to push it a little more toward the blue now. So here's kind of like where we're working with. This is how I'm gonna push the hue in the shadow. Okay, so a lot of the same color, and then a little bit of my Winsor on top to adjust it so it's not so purpley anymore. It's gonna have some purpleness because this first pass was quite purpley. Moving on. Okay, the easiest thing is like, let's start going with where we staked out those shadows, right? So one of the shadows forming along the edge. Let's go ahead and form this shadow along the edge. It's not very regular, it's kind of like wobbling around. Then it's intruding over here. Okay. Over here. And over here. Okay. Cover it all up. We're shooting for that very strong contrast. Okay, disappears behind that one. What happens is that right here, they almost combine. So one splits off in this direction, several shadows combine over here, and the one that comes up from here almost like disappears into another shadow here. So I'm going to make it only appear where I need it to appear. There's another, this is a shadow being cast by one of the folds, and then it blends with the shadow that is being cast by a fold underneath. This one, I'm just combining all the shadows now. I'll sort out where they separate in there a bit later. And also this one is coming over here. It's turning under, forming this one, forms nice little rectangular shape here. No, not rectangular, trapezoid. There is a little sliver of light that I see pops in there. Maybe it's a reflection, maybe it's a direct light that sneaks in. But right here we have kind of pinch, and light kind of spreads out under there like this, somewhat like this. Here we have something like this going on, to where it's turning. There's another pinch area, and it's going up, 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 becoming more narrow, and everything hides into the shadow. An interesting thing, there's a little overlap forming towards hiding this into the shadow, and all of this big area starts combining into a more or less one type of shadow. Kind of irregular here, so that's what I'm gonna keep doing, keeping it on this irregular edge. Sort out the values later. Combine it. The good thing is that you can combine all of those shadows completely wet and wet. So while this one is drying, I kind of don't want to go here until I work a little bit more on this one. So it's a nice big shadow. Be sure you have a lot of paint on your brush. Start with where it's thin and sharp right here. Here it's doing a little bit of those zigzaggedy changes and folding. Here I'm trying to go along the edge as smooth as possible. And then there's another somewhat zigzaggedy area. Then it comes down all the way. What does it do here? It becomes very pointy. Then it kind of bends like this, right? And all of this, while it's still wet, good to get it all combined. There is a little bit of light here, so I won't go right into this corner, but I will pick up the flow of this fold right here. Bring it down, and right where it makes that interesting shape, it combines and leaves like this little triangle here of different value, but it combines right here via this interesting shape with this shadow. This shadow keeps going up, it's making that fold looking more and more narrow. But right in this area, they all combine into one shadow. So for now, I will just leave this just a little bit here, and then I will darken it and push that into the shadow as well. Right now, I'm just working on this one here. My shadow kind of dripped a bit into the light, so I'll have to clean it up later. This is a deeper shadow here, so my paint is drying up, so I'm going to go ahead and add that distinction. Paint dried up, it became lighter, so why not? Now it's starting to look like it's turning, you see? The values changed slightly. And here I'm not pushing it all the way under as well. letting it be kind of a medium transitional value, at least for now. And the last very dark areas of values, I see there's that kind of little wrinkle. There is a little bit of bend on the edge. The edge is bending a little bit, forming a little bit of those darker shadows. And now that we need to form that medium shadow, and see, it's like it's not as dark as the others, and then it becomes darker here. So I will add just a little bit of water to my brush, so my overall value is not too dark. And as I go away, I'll pick up more darker value right here for the darkest area. And as it goes into the shadows, everything is going to be combining. For now, I'll keep them a little bit separate. And what is happening here, this big shadow is definitely present here very strongly, all the way to the wall, all the way to here where it starts rolling. Oh, a little more on the end here. All right, so the only side we didn't touch on is on this side here. And if you notice, it's an interesting thing. So I already noticed that when I was drawing, this receives quite a bit of light, right? Mm-hmm. But even though this side is so close to the lamp, there is that one little fold that's popping up from my angle of observation, and it's darker. You see? So it's a bit counterintuitive, but because it's there, I'm still gonna make sure that I keep it darker. And it's a little fold that pops kind of from behind, disappears like this. So I'm not giving her the darkest of my values, not the darkest, but darker. Just to say that I see that it's there, it's rolling away from me, and I'll give a little bit of a darker area here on the edge. Because that too is rolling away from us. All right. So now we staked it out. The only thing I can improve is make sure that this is definitely dark, because it's going pretty much into that deep shadow away from light. Okay. So now I'm going to give other places some color and some values and shadows and what have you. So we are not comparing our fabric to all white paper, right? It's a pretty bad comparison, so we want to get rid of that as soon as possible. So the other places, the board, the wooden wall on which the blue fabric is hanging, is receiving a lot of light. And when it's receiving a lot of light, yellow becomes more dominant, right? But it is also pretty light. And since it's pretty light, we need to make sure that we get the right hue, but so it doesn't look too baby yellow or something. So I'm taking a little Indian yellow and Indian red. And last time I did the same thing, but I added a little blue to cool it down. so it's not so openly, because we were doing a more gentle light, like a diffused light, right? Not a straight on lamp shining. This one, there is more sun slash lamp, so I am going to, I'll even go over the shadow right now. So this is more open Indian yellow and Indian red together. I'm pretending there is nothing above here. Okay. And then it becomes my white ball that kind of gets some sun on it slash lamp, but it's not the same as this. So I need something first very mild, or some of my fabric blue dripped in. That's not too bad actually. So it separates it, makes it a little less yellow. Very mild wash, right? All right, so on that wall there are also shadows. So we need to form the shadows. So now you can look at that shadow and see how it's, you can't even say it's brown. Even though it's on the brown wall, I can't say that it's brown. It doesn't look brown. It looks more grayish with a brownish hue, with a little ochreish blue, but it also looks more like maybe there's some also blue in there. So test, let's do that. This is just Indian red with some of my Windsor blue in it. And we'll get started with this darker value and figure out how to adjust it later. Remember, values first, color second. Just need to hit it close enough. The one under here, it's fairly gray, strongly gray. So that means we're pushing it more toward the kind of greener gray, like we did last time. And right here what I'm seeing is that it just pretty much the whole wall becomes in the shadow. All right. So now we covered up everything. We don't have much white paper to compare to, and that's good. Already you've seen the contrast between light and shadow is pretty strong. Yeah. But if we compare what we see here with the model, with the actual fabric on the wall, I see that the light can go a little more toward the purpley hue, but its value needs to be only a little bit dark. Mm-hmm. The shadows can go stronger blue and become darker, mm-hmm. which means it's a good deal, because if I still have room in the lighter values, room to make it darker, if I'm not running out of, to where I can't push it any darker, but the color needs to change, that means it's good. So I'm getting it right. If I go now with a slightly purplier hue over the light areas, they will get a little darker, and I can afford that. It would be worse if they couldn't go any darker, but the color had to change. Because if we're changing the color and it's going darker than we need, then all the shadows, the background, everything has to be tuned to that, which means we're going even darker there. All right, so let's make a stronger, mild purple hue. So I'm grabbing a lot of rose and very little blue on it, because I need to make it rosier over what's already very blue. There, see how rosy that is?
Mm-hmm.
So let's experiment on one side. We can experiment like on this whole thing here. It's in the light, so we can cover it up. And it's not our brightest light. Okay, I like it, especially when it dries up and becomes a little lighter. I like how it's going. So you see how strong it is? Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
So it's pretty strong. It's basically Barney the dinosaur color. But over here, it turns our light in just what we need. At least while it's wet. That's what we need. So you see I'm not spreading it over the shadows, because our shadows are going to get much darker. You will totally lose it there, so no reason to waste paint. The value is not going to show up. It's not going to matter. If you go over the shadows, no problem. If you don't, you don't really need to. Here it's my transitional rolling kind of effect, so I'll do that. Yeah, right here was a bit too mild, so I will go over once again. Okay. All right, I'll let this dry. While that is drying, I can add a little more to my shadows. All right, so right now the shadow still looks too brown for my taste, even though I've added blue to it. I would like to go ahead and adjust it a little more. I'm going to get my paint, the Indian yellow, with my Winsor. And by itself, it makes it very green, right? We don't want it very green. But once you get like a medium kind of cooler green, you can add a little bit of your Indian red and adjust it. Okay, I've added too much, so add more blue, cool it down. So we needed a kind of grayish look. Like this. That's better. Very neutral. Doesn't show a lot of color. I'll go right on the edges here. And I'm going to leave it lighter where it goes toward the fabric. Remember that effect, right? I'm going to do the same thing here. This is where the light is the strongest and the contrast is the strongest. And as it spreads toward the fabric, there you see a little more color. It becomes a little lighter. I'll add a bit more here while it's still wet and wet. Also, the blue, when it cools it down, it also tells us that the blue of the fabric is affecting this. It's affecting the shadow and the hue of the shadow. So if you really wanted to make it even stronger, you can go over just the darkest part of the shadow with the even blue or stronger color, just like we did here with the purpley hues. All right, so now I'll do this shadow down here. Basically same thing, but I'm adding more blue to it to distinguish the color. And it's kind of a shadow within a shadow. I'll leave this now the way it is. And I just darken that shadow just a little. And then as I go, I'll darken that again, most likely. All right, so now we can go back in here and start adding more of our different color variations and values, different values and colors. So since our big fold here is somewhat purpley and somewhat less purpley and going away from light, I'm going to give that one roll right here with that mild value. I'm going to combine that where it's turning away and becoming lighter and brighter. The interesting thing is that fold is pretty close to the full light, right? To the lamp. Mm-hmm. But just like last time when it was more diffused light, it was not the brightest fold. These are still the strongest contrast. Mm-hmm. And this is still kind of like not the strongest contrasts that we see in here, even though it's this close to the light. And it's good to note that. It's good to see, good to portray. You kind of look at the whole fold and see where is it really the strongest of all the light, right? Maybe like right in here, indeed closest to the lamp, and then it starts to become darker. Also, I'm trying to capture how it's rolling, and there's a couple of folds, mild, very mild folds. They're not very strong. All right, I'll let this dry for now. Or maybe I'll combine this a bit more while it's wet. Okay, this is already turning away from light. Good. Yes, right here I had that drip where I have a very tiny piece of light here on the fabric and here, but paint dripped, so I'll clean it up now because that's what we're working on now. All right, now I'm going to pick up another one. I'm going to do a similar thing. I'm going to create a roll on this one. This is more in the light. The strongest part of the light is right here. Then it's slightly less light, so I'm going to watch for where there's the light. Less light here, strongest light kind of up here, and as it goes away, it starts losing intensity. Push this more, and leave this more in the light. And I'm trying to do that sort of wet and wet transitions so that you can really see that it's a gentle fold. Strong contrast, but the fold is gentle. The fold is not very strong. Right here all the paint dripped, but I have a strong light and the fold in here, so I'm gonna pick up some of it. If it becomes too light, I can always darken it later. Right now I'm creating that more rolling effect, right? Here, clean up a little bit more. All right. I guess while it's still somewhat wet in here, I can go ahead and give this another pass, push this more into the shadow. And how's that looking? Like, is it turning? Mm-hmm. So while it's wet on the verge, I'll add a little bit of a medium value. And I'll just run my clean brush along this edge. All right, so now it's turning more. That's good. What can we now darken? Work on this area. So let's go and look at this one big fold. What happens is that here we have direct light. It's turning away from light first, so it has its own core shadow. And then the rest of the fabric that flattens out a bit against the wall is having a cast shadow. So this fold casts a shadow on another, and therefore they have different values, right? Because the one that's a cast shadow is starting to pick up reflections. Okay, so now I'm focusing on more blue and less purpley hue. I will for now leave this the way it is, and I will darken this one right here. This is where it's rolling away from light, and it's becoming quite dark. And I'm just plain following the darkest, like the absolute darkest portions of this shadow, and what it does in terms of like shape and shadow, and shape of the shadow, and how thick, how much it is. Here it goes starkly against the lighter fold, but right in here, that intensely dark value starts to separate. This goes on the edge here, almost like a stripe, and then it starts to diffuse in the other direction. Okay, so I'll probably have to come back. I had a bit too much water on the brush here. All the paint is dripping down. All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to lightly combine this transition, but I'll leave this here a bit stronger. I'm gonna let it dry and see how it looks, because I do see a little bit lighter value next to the darkest shadow, and then this actually becomes a little bit darker going under this fold. And if I see it, then I have to do it. All right. Right under this fold, becomes a little bit darker, but not hugely dark. Not like that. All right, what can I do now to continue with this process? All right, I'm seeing that out of this whole area, the darkest values are right here. And between this very sharp transition between light and shadow, and where this fold dips in and has a very deep spot. So for now, that's what I will do. I will go ahead and separate that. That's that deep spot there. Seems to be kind of disappearing into this overall darkness. Goes right under here. And then it's almost like it spreads out and comes to this pointy place. Like this. Part of the shadow intensifies here, and then it becomes lighter. I'll just smooth this out. All right. For now, I'll leave it like that. I'll sort out my other transitions later. There is also a little bit of a light right along the rolling transition between light and shadow. It becomes dark, and then there's a little reflection. That's so delicate, I'll leave it until later. All right, and right here, I can now intensify some of this. Intensify it here, where the transition between light and shadow is very strong. All the way down into here. And this is kind of bumpy. It's folding kind of in a very rough way. So that's what I'll do. And some of it comes right to the edge, like this, making the edge darker. And some of this rough folds, I'll just make them even more rough. Go in here like this. All right, good. So see how it's drying out, creating that blob? That means I have to come back when it dries up a bit more. All right, in this whole big shadow here, see, first I combined everything into one shadow. Now I'm going to separate them and see where the shadow is the darkest. I see like very similar shape we did in the very diffused light. I see that almost a bird shape again here. And the bird shape is still the darkest. Maybe it slightly changed its shape, but not by much. And what I'm seeing that is right here. It goes behind this fold, but it doesn't go all the way to the edge here. It has a lighter transition, so it's already starting to separate into different values, even within shadows. All right, and down here, there's a different planes, so the fabric folds, right? So here it's very much in the light. Here it goes more facing downward, away from light. Even though this is in the shadow, it still is facing a little bit more toward light than this one. But down here it's facing away from light once again. More away from light than the others. And so I'm gonna get that. And basically I'm just looking like, what kind of shape is it forming? Seems to be more like that. All right, and one of the other reasons this is so much darker within the shadow is because it's right next to this light. And that fold is picking up very strong light. Okay, so now we're moving on to this shadow. This shadow is lighter overall toward here, and it starts to pick up darkness and going very dark over here. So that's what I will do. I'm looking like, where is it starting to pick up that darkness? Right across from here. And I won't push it quite, no, I can push it to the edge, I have room. Okay, and then it's getting much darker. And dies into here. overall it's rather spreading, so I'll go ahead and give it a little more medium transitional value. Next, we can darken this one. It's looking awfully mild, but it's not as dark as the others. It's just right now it has too much of that blank lighter value going through. So let's first give it a little bit of more intense darkness here. But as it goes away and the fold becomes less strong, I will just keep adding water and spreading that value, color and value, spreading it all over the place. All right. And compared to everything else, obviously now we can somewhat push this a little bit darker, right? Mm-hmm. But now we can focus on definitely where it would be the darkest and make it look really turning rolly. And it has like somewhat irregularity in how it turns. So that's how I'll do it. All right, I'll leave it for now a little stronger, see how it looks when it dries out. I'll probably want to come back and soften up the edge later, but I don't want to do it now. All right, so coming back here, restoring what got kind of washed away, dripped away. Find more places to darken because now we have something to compare it to. And the other thing is if you are running out of how dark you can go, like your paint just refuses to go darker, we need to change the hue. So I added some fresh Indian red into my blue Windsor. And I'm going to see what effect it has. There's much darker effect here. And that is where I needed it a lot darker. Where else do I need it darker? Right down here. I may need it a bit stronger darkness right here to intensify that fold. This is still drying, so I'll hold off. Where can I sharpen my darkness? Right here. Remember we were doing that and it became lighter. Okay, now we'll go with a slightly different hue. The birdie. And how about here? No, probably not so dark. And anywhere in here.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's all right. anywhere on the edges perhaps, where there's really sharp, like deeper wrinkles, more pinched, emphasize that. And here it's already looking pretty dark, so I'll leave that be. All right. And here we can still add that intensely dark value. Because when it starts to get this dark, it's very hard to tell the color of that value, right? All right, well, we're getting really strong contrasts now. So we can bring the other shadows just a little bit more into our contrasts. So let's make sure that the other shadows are also not too light. And here I see how it's picking up some warm light, and here, so I'll add this bit warm light. Strangely, it's reflecting something warm, so I think it's coming from the objects that are down below. All right, leave it like this for now. Look, I'm gonna get some of my blue and actually go with blue over the edge. Change that hue to be cooler. And that is the blue that I had in the darkest shadows in there. All right, so what can we do now to get it more like improved? We can leave the strongest contrasts here, but within those contrasts, there is a little variation. A variation on value and hue. So I'm now making like my somewhat purpley, not as strong as that, not as strong as that rose. And I'm going to separate right here where the light is still, it's light, but it's not so light, right? And right here, it's getting slightly darker. And just so to make sure that I don't lose the actual light, the stronger, lighter light, I'll pick up a little paint here, kind of restore that contrast. All right. I'll pick up a little bit of light here right on the edge. See how it becomes like very bright, strong. It's probably facing like one of the places where it's facing the most into this lamp. And as it goes away, it becomes darker. So where does it become darker? Where does it disappear into the cast shadow? I'm comparing it to this area. I'm seeing it so right in here somewhere. All of this goes into the cast shadow. And you're only seeing it like barely, right? So make this a bit stronger. Leave that as your medium transitional value. What can we do right here? We can do the same kind of effect. Right on the edge, this is where it's more sharp folding. And the rest is not quite so bright. Maybe right here where it has very tight kind of pinched area, we can pick up again a little bit of paint, make it stronger contrast, and let the rest kind of blend. Clean this up as well. This is already good. So this is our mild, and this is more of a shadow. This is our darker part, where this is kind of medium. Here it becomes darkest, and it becomes darkest toward this area. So I'm depositing a bunch of darker paint in kind of dab kind of way. Then what happens? Right here, this light disappears and it's no longer a strong light. I'll emphasize it more. I'll push it more into the shadow. And the same thing happens here, just a little bit higher. This is hiding away. And it almost wants to do it here. So that strong light also gets affected. To where right here, this is more intense, right here it's more mild, and it kind of never recovers, it never becomes very bright. So I'm adding another value for that rolling effect. And I can add a little bit of that value here, because it's also, well, here it's more sharp, here it starts to become more mild. The effect of the light mildly unfolding. And once again becoming a little more intense toward the edges, toward these parts. All right, those look too similar in how light and dark they are, right? I'll work on that in a little bit. Not quite right now. What I want to do is give this another mild value, but keeping it definitely not as dark as that. Otherwise, it's going to look too similar. And they're not very similar. All right. What else can we add? So we've separated. Now I can add a little more like detail here on the edge. So for example, I'm seeing that right here it's definitely a teeny bit brighter than the rest. And the other half is just a tad darker. So that means this part is more toward the light. There's a little bit of a irregular folding here. I'm doing it on such a small scale, I'm never quite sure. Should I not? I'll try and add it. And then I'll emphasize this edge a little bit more. So I'm emphasizing the separation between this, almost like an edge where it turns very sharply, and that little more triangular medium value down below, right? And I'm uniting that with this one here, because that one is also where it's very strong bright. And then it becomes less bright over here. I just gave it a little bit of a roll, right? So now it looks a little rolly. So now I'm gonna give a bit of a softening over here. so it looks more rolly as well, but not not in here, because I want that to look more sharp and come forward. Right here, this is quite light, so I'll push my shadow just a little bit over, restore the kind of fuller shape. Combine that with some of the darker value here, but not super dark. Pick up some of that paint. So the value darkens just a little bit, not too much. And then the other one comes up being just a teeny bit lighter. Again, not by too much. And it's, you can give it a little more of that sort of like zigzag transitions, right? To where it's not very straight, actually. There we go. And then they become even darker, but not super, super dark. And then here we need to punch up that transition. So right here it still is quite a bit dark. It's not very mild. Even though the lighter values are getting darker as they turn further away from light, they are still quite a bit sharp next to all of these dark values here. Right, while they are darkening here, here they are lightening. So I'm going to pick up a little bit of color here, a little bit of value, just a tad. I don't want to overdo it. And create that extra reflection. I am looking at that reflection, and I'm seeing that it actually combines already nicely with my slightly lighter value here. And then I'm seeing that it also kind of repeats over here. So there is a bit of a darkening before that lighter little area, but right here is it appears a little bit of a reflection. Okay, I'll pick it up and I'll let the rest be darker. Okay, but then I'm seeing that little triangular part where it's kind of in the light but not quite, kind of like here, is also an echo of this little triangle. So I'm gonna make sure that I emphasize that. Darken it a little more toward the light and brightening my light just where it meets that. And I want to keep that nice and sharp here, bright, sharp. And then it softens up as it goes and hides into the shadow. So what is happening here now, I'm evaluating how light or dark this is, and I'm seeing that there is still more work that could be done in there. And I can intensify my shadow just a little bit where it meets that medium light, right? If I intensify it here, it will look better, more three-dimensional. But I don't want it to be all the same everywhere, because it's not. There is also a little reflection within that shadow. All right, like that. So I'm giving it a little bit of a darker pass. It doesn't look quite dark enough. Okay. And where is it also darkening once again? It's darkening right here, because this is now a cast shadow. Where that one is, it's core shadow from the actual fold. And between them, there's that transitional area which is actually somewhat affected by reflected light. So that's why it's looking like that. Slightly darker next to where it's getting lighter, reflected light, darker again because it's lighter here. All right, so a little sharpening on this shadow here wouldn't hurt. I kept trying to make it darker right in here, and it kept drying up and becoming lighter. So now I will go ahead and give it another darker pass. Then it kind of almost stops. And does something like this. But part of this is still coming forward too much into the light. See, this looks too much like the light, means we still have to darken it. Push it more into the shadow. Starting right here. And then it pops out of the shadow again. Can darken this while I'm in the neighborhood. This doesn't receive a lot of light. Giving it another rolly feel with a medium value. Okay. This is not as strong, not as bright, not in the full light. Okay, this one, I see how it combines just somewhat with this light here. So let's give it just a little more continuity, but not so much that it's competing with the brightest light. This one has a bit more of a slightly darker value. This has a slightly darker value. And this one here is not all that bright. This one here is not all that perfect. There are little medium kind of folds on the edges coming up. All right. Here it's already forming a bit darker on the edge, which is good. We can add a little bit more darker value to this side where it's turning away from us. Okay. And I'll make this a little more defined. See how it's very strong contrasts here, here, and then like, what happened? Where did the light go? And it's not a cast shadow, it's just the way it's turning. We are not getting a lot of light back to our eyes from this fold. That's interesting, and I think one of the effects that is affecting it and making it darker is the fact that the wall is getting a lot of straight-on light, right? And if this is super bright, and this is also super bright, then something has to become darker. It's darker value, but it's darker color, darker values, so it all just needs to be pushed a little more into a more delicate shade. And I'm going to smooth out this transition here so it's not so sharp, just by running the brush over, just a little moist brush. So right here, very bright. In fact, it looks brighter than the one in back of it. That little one in back of it is not as bright. And then the rest, it's just disappearing. All right, so what else can we we can do the same effect right in here. It's also most intense here, but it's less intense light here. And right in here, it's kind of becoming less intense. What is happening to this fold? That one is great. It's all very strong light, right? But only a little bit toward the top is where it softens up. It's not so bright light, so I'll only touch a little. And I like how this value is coming, so I'll get that little rolling going. And remember how I said I would come back later and add that effect where there is the core shadow, where it's turning, the shape is turning by itself, and then there is a reflection, right? So this, I like how it looks now next to this darkness. It looks as a reflection. If I just run right along here, very thin, and just make it darker, it will give me the effect that I'm looking for. And that is the gentle turning, well, not so gentle, like it's almost very strong, but in some places more gentle than in others. And it's becoming darker. And then it's becoming lighter again, because it's a reflected light. Okay. And I see the same effect going up there, but I think what I'll do is I'll let this lighter reflection work for me. Instead of trying to bring that very thin dark value, I'll just make sure that this lighter reflection continues just a little bit longer through here, because everything's so tiny now in there. Very tiny, and I'm doing it in a much smaller scale than you will. You can do it all the way. Mm-hmm. Now, we got that. What can we also do is perhaps this here could be improved just a little bit. The darks are already pretty good. We just need to have a little more transitional kind of color value, right? The there's already some of it that's going on nicely, but we can make it a little bit more pronounced, so the transition between light and shadow is not quite so stark. I almost said it in German, stark. Okay, and so this could be two. Soften up the rolling part. So I already saw it was like nicely becoming very rolling, and I'm just making sure I definitely have that effect. And right through the middle here, I want it a bit more purpley. Through the middle here, a bit more of this effect, and a little more here, just a little additional lighter value for those other little, very mild folding, not very strong. This is the one that's in back that for some reason isn't getting any light. All right. I'm looking at this and I can still add more. All right, so give me your feedback.
how you got, specifically what I like in your drawings and your shadows is when in the shadow, there's still more shadow in the shadow. Like you get the oil on like your, that one.
Shadow within a shadow.
Yeah.
Because there's some reflected light in some of those places.
But this side seems more purple than this one.
Yeah.
So that's pretty well done.
And I think when I was still purpling it down, I didn't quite give it enough rose. So I will look at it and think, do I want to give it more purpley? Or because it's closer to light, is it starting to lose a little bit of the purpley? I think that this shadow needs to be whitened. Right now it's too,
yeah, it is
too, yeah.
I think you should start like even more, even here.
Yeah.
And then down.
Yeah.
So like all the way here.
So I didn't want to overdo it in the beginning because it's very gentle fold, right? It's curvature is quite big here, so I already prepared the paint. So I just wanted to see if you see this one, this one. And it might be good that it wasn't all done all at once, because now we can have a more definite rolling effect here. So let's see how this dries. Well, yeah, let's think about it. If I keep it more on the purpley end here, and this is less purpley, doesn't bother anybody. I think I can, now that I'm comparing like just this part to the actual drapery, I see how it is a bit more rosy. It does lose somewhat of that rosiness on the brightest highlights, which is when I was picking up the paint, it was already giving me that effect. All right, so I'll just go. I can stand making it slightly less light. This is actually, this fold here is actually lighter than that. So I have room to give it value and change in color. And where is it becoming less purpley? But right here. So I can stand correcting that. And now that I'm comparing these two, I would definitely like to pick up a little more brightness here. Now, I remember I already kind of darkened it, right, as it was going away, because this is the brightest, so I'm very mindful of the fact that I can't overdo it. Just can't. Gotta be very, very careful and not making this as bright as all of these parts here. But it has to be just a bit brighter than that. And if it still doesn't do, I will simply give this another value. All right, so let's, it kind of came out pretty strong. I'm gonna do a similar thing here, where it's more purpley toward the top, kind of becoming more blue in the, where it becomes a stronger light away from those places. Such is the nature of this particular way of lighting this fabric. That's how it came out. And this one is, keeps trying to stay too light, right in here. Okay. And we'll keep trying to make it darker. All right, so I'm not gonna finagle with that anymore. It's so not important. The main objective is to get all these folds and that light and those color changes and value changes, right? So I think in that way, perhaps if I just pick up a little more light here. To show that stronger, somewhat stronger light here. Oh, there was a wet drop in here. That's all right. I'll let it dry and I'll come back over it a bit. Yeah, with so many layers of paint, it's not lifting up too easy. All right, let it dry a bit. The other improvement I can do is right here. This edge is quite bright and strong. And this edge goes right into this area where it gets tightly pinched. And combines with this very strong light here. All right. So how is the overall change, contrasts between light and shadow?
I would say it's pretty good.
It's close.
Yeah, it's close.
Mm-hmm.
I like this area after you added the rose because this contrasts, so this color is so nice.
Yeah. And that is probably, we are seeing that in many places. It's leaning more purpley because it's hanging plain against that kind of orangey yellow wall, right? But personally, I feel like the wall can use a little more color. It feels stronger compared to this fabric. So I'm gonna do that. And for that, I'm gonna get again my Indian yellow and a tiny bit of this Indian red in it. By itself, it looks like this. So I think if I added a little bit more, the value seems stronger, and look what I'm going to do. I'm going to be clever with my effects. I'm gonna leave it this light next to the brightest of the fabric, right here, right? And right here. I'm gonna let it be darker and more yellow there. And I am going to, actually I'm looking at it a little more here. Yeah. And I'm going to do the same thing here. It's that effect where it becomes brighter when it's encountering darker areas, right? For some reason it's a little less here than next to this one. See how in some places my paint dripped into the background? It's perfectly appropriate there. I just made it drip on purpose. It helps you make that edge feel like it's rolling away from us, disappearing. That's a good thing. Okay. So if you emphasize that effect, doesn't have to be perfect, as long as you see that emphasis, it's good. Means you're doing it just right. All right, so actually it's pretty much we can stop here, except that I'll just patch this up, do a little patch up work. I'll just leave it like that. I won't even blend anymore. Okay. So, any more questions?
No, at least not yet.
Okay, I will expand this shadow just one more time. I like how it's rolling now, so I'll add another value and let that dry. Okay, now I definitely will stop.